Hey everybody. Today I want to talk about a really important topic that I recognize significantly from my history with narcissistic abuse and borderline abuse and questions that I hear a lot from people. This is the theme about hope and when hope is dangerous, like when hope is dangerous to your sanity. And here's the deal, okay? People change when they want to change. That's it. Everyone can change. Every human has the potential to change themselves, to change their ways. Most people choose not to. Now, when we're talking about narcissistic abuse, when we're talking about the cluster B personality disorders, what they call antisocial personality disorder, which is the psychopathy, sociopathy, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic, and borderline personality disorder. All four of these are very similar. They all use very similar covert aggressive manipulation tactics. Sure, there's slight differences, in the different brands of this, in the different names that they've given these different categories. And I think it's really important not to get hung up on that, not to get too hung up on, well, are they narcissistic, or are they borderline, or are they sociopathic? You can get really lost in that. The point is to notice, the kinds of emotional manipulation, emotional blackmail, the kinds of psychological abuse tactics that all of these people use in various forms and the effects that it has on the victim and survivor of that abuse. Right, so I've done many videos on that topic, on the different effects, and then the book Psychopath Free by Jackson McKenzie really goes into this. If you haven't read the book yet, definitely get that. Check out my video review of that book. I'll put a link in this video below in case you haven't seen that yet. I did that one several months ago. But today I want to talk about this concept of hope and when that hope is really dangerous. And the thing is that, I talked to Dr. Simon in the interview that we did on understanding, the manipulative people and how they work and these tactics and everything, and he talked about how narcissism, the cluster B spectrum is really it's a spectrum. It's kind of like autism, where there are some people that are at the extreme and there are some people only may have a few of those traits, right? And that's okay, right? If some people have a few of those traits, then there's a big prognosis that they can change. There's a big chance and hope that they can change. Does that mean they'll change for sure? No. The only thing that means that person will change for sure is if they decide from inside themselves that they want to go ahead and change. They might live their whole life with a few of those, narcissistic tendencies and maybe really annoy some people and maybe cause, some interrelational issues and stuff, but they may not necessarily be abusing people. Now, when we're talking about people at the extreme end of that scale, of that spectrum, we're talking about people who regularly emotionally abuse people. Of course they don't admit that. Of course they don't. They don't see it as abuse. They see themselves as victims. They often paint themselves as victims. Oh, I would never do that. I don't abuse people. And then they'll turn around and do the same thing. The borderline personality disorder is really characteristic of this. Every now and then, they don't like that I clump them together on the cluster B spectrum as if I invented that scale. It's like they're on the cluster B spectrum for a reason, right? That personality disorder is listed in conjunction with those others for a reason. And, they get upset that I put them together, and we're not like that, and we don't abuse people. But then 2 messages later, or that very same conversation, they're doing that exact thing that they claim not to do. They're using some sort of, covert emotional manipulative strategy to try to get me to bend my perspective, to excuse them and to say, no, it's really not that bad. No, they're really not like that. And I understand that some borderlines have been and are victims of psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists. That definitely happens. There are some relationships where there is a switch dynamic, where there are people that take turns abusing one another. It could be a sociopath and a borderline. And one day the sociopath is the abuser and the borderline is the victim. And one day the borderline is the abuser and the sociopath is the victim, or maybe even in the same conversation. That kind of thing happens. And, the danger is not to get swept into that, into way they're trying to manage the impression around what they're doing. Stop listening to people's words. Stop listening to what they're saying, because you know, if you've had contact with someone on the cluster B spectrum, they often say all the right things, right? They often talk about change, how they want to change, how they're gonna change, how they're working so hard to change, but you don't see the actions, right? What are the actions telling you? The actions are telling you whether a person is changing or not. If they're continuing to use these same covert manipulation strategies, which the borderline, loves to use the guilt trip. In fact, it's a very dangerous form of manipulation, because it will leave you thinking that you're the problem, that you did something wrong, when in fact you didn't. They're using that to get you to do what they want, and they know that if you give in, then they get what they want. And you learn that if you give in, then they calm down and you get like a momentary peace, but it just keeps happening. The behavior keeps happening. When the behavior keeps happening, that person is showing you they are not changing. That person is showing you they don't want to change. If they wanted to change, they would change their actions. They would change their behavior. They would accept 100% responsibility for their thoughts, feelings, and actions. Okay? That is the only point of empowerment. When a person accepts 100% responsibility for their thoughts, feelings, and actions, that is the takeoff point for self-empowerment. There is no other way to empowerment. If you don't own it, if you don't own who you are and what you do and how you act and how you treat other people. So if a person is telling you, oh, I'm working on it, I'm really changing, but they never take responsibility for what they're doing to other people, they're not taking responsibility. They're not going to change. If they don't admit what they're doing, they're not going to change. So, when to have hope and when not to have hope. If you're dealing with a person who has a few narcissistic tendencies or a few traits of one of those other cluster B personality disorders, and I mean like a minor few, and they agree that they have a problem, and they agree that they want to get help, and they agree that they want to change, and they get into therapy, and they get professionals on board, and they start changing their actions in real time, meaning they're not continuing to do those same things that are abusive and manipulative and causing problems in your relationship. When they are working actively on that and you see changes in the behavior, then it's safe to have hope, because the person is taking action. They're showing you through their actions that they don't want to be like that anymore. They see the reality of the situation. They see the effects that it has on you and other people, and they are working to change themselves. They realize that their actions have a negative effect on other people. Now, when you're talking about someone at the other end, of the extreme, where they don't see it, they don't admit it, they don't change their actions, they don't accept 100% responsibility for their life. You've already tried to talk about, some things, and they're just either dismissive of your feelings and perceptions of reality, or they turn it around on you and they're like, oh, you're just oversensitive, oh, you're just crazy, oh, you're just whatever, and completely denying that. Or they don't want to hear about your feelings, they totally stonewall that. Or you tell them about what they're doing, and then they say, oh, well, okay, I did that, but I only did that because you blah blah blah. And it's always your fault, right? When they're not owning the responsibility of their actions, when they are unwilling to address them, to look at them, to work on them, there is no hope for change. None. And the sooner you bury that hope and you mourn the idea of what you thought that relationship was, who you thought that person was, the future that you imagined and hoped for, the sooner you bury that and mourn that, the better, because that hope is toxic. That hope starts to pollute your life. That hope starts to make you feel like you're going insane, because you're continually coming back for more abuse from a person who is never going to change. So look at the actions, look at the self-responsibility. When a person is telling you that they're a victim and they're not owning any responsibility, that it's always somebody else's fault, that it's just so hard to be them and you don't know how hard it is to be them, and blah, 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 that person is not accepting self-responsibility. That person is using a poor me manipulation strategy. Stay away from those people. Those people are very dangerous for your sanity. They will get you very, very confused. The victim, form of this kind of narcissistic or borderline abuse is, I think, the most dangerous because it really looks like victim sometimes. And it really triggers the guilt inside of you because you have an actual conscience, right? And so when a person is telling you that it's your fault and you should do this for them and you should do that for them, it kind of like makes your stomach feel heavy because you're like, well, am I doing enough? Am I giving enough? Am I giving this person enough chances, to keep doing it over and over again? That's the danger. Like, you could lose your sanity. You could start to take on the responsibility of that person when that is not your responsibility. Okay, when you enter into a relationship, you own 50% of that relationship. 50% responsibility of that relationship, but you own 100% responsibility of you. Okay, if you are with somebody who does not own responsibility for themselves, they do not own responsibility for their actions, get away from that person. That person does not want to change. That person does not believe anything is wrong with them. That person believes they are entitled to keep doing that to you and other people, and that you should just deal with it and give them what they want. That is a very dangerous person to be around. That will escalate. It will not get better. It will keep escalating. The only way you know a person is going to change is when they accept 100% responsibility for themselves. That is the only time that I would recommend having any hope. Because that hope can be so dangerous. I saw myself in the past getting really caught up in that hope, and that hope kept me there, kept me hoping for the better future, kept me hoping for that thing they kept promising, kept me hoping for change, that things would go back to when they were good or get better and be something new. The hope can be very, very dangerous. So I just wanted to put this message out there because I know a lot of you are asking this question. I get this question a lot. I think it's natural. You come out of this kind of abusive situation, or you find yourself in the abusive situation, and you really doubt things. You really doubt yourself, and then you almost feel guilty for giving up that hope. But here's the deal. Giving up that hope in a person who is not going to change does not mean you're not a hopeful person. Okay, you might be a hopeful person. You might have hopes and dreams for the future that you want to create, and that's wonderful. It doesn't mean that you're a pessimistic, negative person just because you acknowledge the fact that this person is not taking any steps to change. They're not changing their behavior. They're not even owning the responsibility of their behavior. That's a boundary that you need to set, a limit that you need to make, with that hope. Save your hope for the things that you do have control over. Save your hope for the things that you're building. Save that hope for someone who shows up in your life who's actually owning 100% responsibility for themselves. Don't waste it on someone like that, because I can tell you that, I have never regretted burying that hope in the past with all those abusive relationships, and even present day with my mother. I don't regret burying that hope. I can tell you that every time I held on to that hope long after the date of expiration, I did regret that. I regretted that because it further traumatized me. It caused me further harm. And the thing that you need to recognize is that when you're dealing with a person who does not own 100% responsibility for who they are, for the actions they take, for the emotions they have, the effect that they have on other people, that is a relationship of inevitable harm. It will inevitably bring harm to you. I made a video about that one too. That one was really short. Check that out if you haven't seen it yet. And, get really honest and really clear with yourself and recognize when it's time to bury that hope. Because the sooner you do that, the sooner you accept that that person has a real problem and they're not going to change, and it's safer to bury that hope so you can go on with your life, the easier it's going to be for you to go on. You have the right to happiness, to peace of mind. You have the right to follow your dreams and to be hopeful for the future. Don't waste it on someone who doesn't care about that, on someone who's just going to take a crap all over that. You deserve so much better. I'm sending you all a big hug.